Speaking of movies and stuff, Lord of the Rings, we talked about that a few times. How do you feel about adaptations, and would you ever let someone adapt any of your stories?
Man, that's always like, oops, sorry, I'm picking things here. Yeah, that's the million dollar question too, right? Like it's just like I I have such a love for good storytelling through movies, and I think they can be done well. And so absolutely. I think I would be there. I would just hope that I had enough, I don't know what exactly goes into making sure that you have a say on a movie.
Yeah.
Because I mean, one of the worst adaptations of all time, I think, was the Eragon movie. Did you ever? Right? Like we
It's
all just
so
agree
bad.
that was it's so bad.
They put feathers on a dragon. Like, come
It
on.
just and they weren't even like with some of the casting, I wasn't even mad. You know, like Jeremy Irons, like that was like there was some good casting in that movie, and it just, oh my goodness, the writing was terrible. It was so bad.
And
so
to be
I don't
honest,
want that.
It's not even a hard story to adapt. Like, it's fairly straightforward.
Yeah.
You know,
like they changed things that didn't need to be changed. Like that, when that came out, I was just like, that's what not to do. And then I think often we see that like, oh, that was okay. And then we see, you know, really good adaptations in my mind, like Lord of the Rings, what Peter Jackson did originally with them. That's amazing. And I think to be able to share it in a way that, you know, brings it to a larger audience, and in such a, like, when we can see something, when we can like, that just helps immerse us even more in the world. And all of a sudden we like, you know, when we imagine Eragon, I'm thinking of Vigo, you know. There is no other. That is Eragon now, right? Yeah. So I think it's a super powerful medium. I would absolutely love to see it. When I write, I am a very visual, like I feel like it plays out like a movie in my head. I see it, I hear it, and then I can write it, sort of thing. I actually have an audiobook being produced right now. And so last night I got the final scenes, the final chapters, and the impact of like actually hearing your words and the story, but from somebody else, like it's outside of me, right? Like I've read this story, I don't know how many times, but to hear it and hear these voices and everything kind of come to life, and it hits the way you want.
Yeah.
That's cool. Such a wild moment. I was just freaking out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really, really cool.
That's super cool. Yeah, I think so if you watch I'm sure you've watched some of the like the behind the scenes of Lord of the Rings and stuff. There's I don't know what part of it is, but they're interviewing Peter Jackson, and he says something to the effect of, we didn't want any of our own stuff in this. We wanted to create Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Like they wanted to be as close and they wanted to tell his story, not have their own. Yeah. And I think that, like, for me, I'd have to make sure I found someone like that. Like, obviously things have to change. They can't be like, you can't straight adapt a book over to a movie. Yeah. But it's that you hear a lot of creators. I hear this in Star Wars sometimes when you hear them do interviews. You hear this in a couple of things where they're talking about like, we want to take what George Lucas did, but like totally redo it. And to me, that, like, I guess I understand what they're trying to say, but you have to honor what it originally was, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, Star Wars is a perfect example of this, because it's at the point now where it's so big and so sprawling that people are like, I think it's separate a little bit, where they're like, oh yeah, we can do our own thing with this. But then they're surprised when the fan base disconnects and they're like, no. And I think that is probably one of the single biggest things, is if you've lost the original vision, you've lost the original, like you're going to lose at least a portion. You might gain some new ones. It's not that it's invalid, but I think you shouldn't be shocked when you lose, you know, kind of viewership or readership, if you've just totally departed from what the first concept was that drew everybody to it.
Yeah, that's I think the one that was the most recent for me so George Lucas had very specific, like, this is what the Force is. He had a very clear definition of what it was. And now they're kind of trying to redefine it. And I think that's where they're losing people, because it's like, you could still keep the original definition he created and create a cool story. But yeah, it's like that. You're just walking away from what he made, and, you know.
Yeah. And then I mean, obviously it's still Star Wars, but I think it's like, okay, what are the things that are like fundamental to this world? And, you know, if you're talking about having your own book adapted, that's absolutely it. Like, of course, most of us probably won't get a 3-movie sort of like sprawling epic type of thing, storytelling. But, you know, if it ever was made into a movie, does it have the same heart? You know, do the characters face the same sort of challenges and conflicts as they move forward and they have their own same arc? I think those are the things that really matter. If, you know, the color of the trees is different, well, nobody's really gonna get too bent out of shape about that sort of stuff. But I think when you lose that heart, that's when you get people up in arms.
Yeah. Well, and I love
territory.
Yeah. Well, and you know, who knows, what might get in trouble for even talking about it, because everyone's loves it. But Sanderson, he talked about something recently too, where he's like, oh yeah, Hollywood's been knocking on his door for quite a while now, but he is kind of in this great place of like, he's like, I don't need their money, and I want to make sure they do it right. So he's like in that perfect zone of he can protect his work and not give it to anyone until he's like very sure that that's going to be the right way to go.
Yeah. And like a story like that, you get nervous because I would be like, I'm nervous. As soon as you said that, I'm like, ooh, I've got butterflies. Like, I can't imagine seeing like some of these characters that I loved. You just, they need to be done justice. Like you know, I am that sort of fan. I get a little weird about that stuff.
I get real protective. Like every time I hear something got announced and they're like, we're going to make this movie. And I was like, oh geez. Like, I like, please don't.
Yes. That was them bringing Thrawn into the Star Wars universe for me, because I had read all of Timothy Zahn's books and stuff. And the way that he fleshes out that character, you're like, you feel like you know this guy and how he's going to be. And I have feelings about it. How he was brought into it's like, it's a whole write-off, but it is not the character that I knew. And I think that is just always a hard thing, as like when you're, you know, on the reader viewer side of things, we get so attached to these characters. They mean something to us, right? So it's kind of fun.
Yeah, definitely. So we've talked a little bit about some